Hello.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our Artists Help Ukraine live stream today on the Proko 3D channel. I'm here with Andrew Joseph Keith. You guys all know him pretty well by now. No introduction needed, but if you want to introduce yourself, go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. I teach the sculpting course and working on the next one on portraiture. And so for those that are interested in traditional methods of sculpting, I'm kind of that department over at Proko.
Great. And we're here today because of this event, Artists Help Ukraine.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I was really excited about this. It just seems like a really cool, creative way to do something, positive in the world and help the victims in Ukraine. I thought it was a great idea by Stan to put this forward, and so I'm happy to be a part of it. And yeah, excited for the live stream today.
Cool. And Andrew, do you want to show your donation reward?
Yeah.
For the live
So
stream?
these are the donation rewards that I put up for. Just there's three of these. They're $85, and so they're probably going to go pretty quick. And so they're over at proko.com/Ukraine, right? Can you find all of the rewards over there?
Yeah.
Is that where you find? Okay, yeah. And so they're just cast in plaster, and it has the secondary forms of the head. So it would be great for drawing or painting, or just kind of to have something cool on your desk. And so these are the rewards that are available until they're gone. So that's what I'm going to be sculpting today. Once the demo starts, I'm just going to show kind of the sped up process of sculpting this. And then once the portrait sculpting course comes out, there's going to be lessons that go over specifically more of the process. But today we're just going to kind of talk about it. And that is the reward that you guys can get, and we'll send it out to you.
Great. So today, let me change this up. We have this demo that we can start. And Andrew, I'll get off here for a second if you want to start narrating this. And
yeah, sounds good.
Please ask questions as
the
demo progresses. And
yeah, and if there are questions, where do those show up? They'll just
they go. Yeah, so you can either ask them in YouTube chat or go to proko.com/638.
Let me get that over here. So yeah, if on YouTube chat, on the Proko 3D YouTube channel is where you can ask any questions if you have them, and I'll get narrating this. So here you can see I've just kind of built a really simple armature. It's very basic, just some crumpled up paper, and then kind of this tail for the neck. So it's kind of like a lollipop. And that's just basically as simple as you can get when it comes to the armature, a little bit of masking tape. And then I just take these warm pancakes of clay. Everybody likes to ask what type of clay I use. So Chabon NSP is the clay that I'm using. And it's a non-dry modeling clay, so it gets softer when it's warm. So right now I have it nice and warm. That just kind of speeds up the process of this beginning stage of the sculpture. So you can also see in the corner here, in the left-hand corner, that there's the little écorché. That's what I'm using as a reference, just to kind of base the forms off of, and the size and proportion and everything. But I'm not too worried about that, since it's going to be a really simplified version. So that's just kind of what I'm starting to lay in right now. Let's see. Is there room for a third temple inside that head? I don't know what that means. There's a question, but I don't know. I guess maybe. Let's see. Is there 3D? Is it 3D sculpting or hands-on sculpting? So this is traditional sculpting. So just with clay. That's what my courses cover right now. I believe that Proko will get some instructors for 3D sculpting, digital sculpting. I don't have a background in that, and so I like traditional. I like working with my hands to form the clay. I think that's a way to get back to kind of the rich tradition of sculpture, and so that's what I prefer. But I think I will get into digital eventually, once I am a little bit less busy working on these classic traditional types of sculpting. So here you can see I'm just kind of squishing out what I like to call these pancakes, and then just filling the armature uh, and making what is basically the Loomis head. If you remember from Stan's videos, just a simplified version of the Loomis head is what I'm starting out with. And adding on some newspaper to the neck, I felt like I wanted a little bit more thick. And the newspaper, it really just helps not to have to use so much clay, because clay is expensive. So this type of armature, it's really just a filler, so that I can fill it mostly with newspaper and then just put the clay on the surface. Let's see. So grabbing a little bit more newspaper for the neck. Yeah, and if you guys have questions or comments or anything, want to know anything about anything, I'm an expert on everything I have an opinion about. So now I'm just adding the neck, trying to go pretty quickly to build this out. And you'll notice that that neck is tilted forward. We want to get that forward tilt in the neck. It's not a lollipop that comes straight down, even though that's how the armature was. Now I want to start thinking about how that neck kind of tilts back, and get that in this is the primary forms right here. And now I'm just kind of closing that off. And the neck's going to be pretty long for a lot of the process of this sculpture. And then I'll kind of solidify where I want the actual bottom of the neck to be. But for now, I just wanted a long neck, just so that I could have it a little bit raised up from the table to work on the details. You can see how soft this clay is. This clay is actually Chavant medium, but I've mixed a little bit of hard clay in because I prefer a firmer clay, and you'll see why that's an advantage later on in the sculpture, because I'm like grabbing the sculpture as I'm working, and just having a little bit harder clay makes it so that I'm not constantly messing up the sculpture if I put my hands in an area where I'm not working on, just because it's firm enough. But because I've warmed it up enough, it's pretty solid at this, or it's pretty soft, malleable, really easy to go on. And then if you're using water-based clay, it would be like a very hydrated water-based clay is what you want to start out with. Then as it dries out over time, as you get closer to the finished detail, you would let it dry so that it's a little bit more, they call it like cheese hard, where you can work on the details when it's harder. So that's the nice thing about clay that kind of depends on the temperature or the moisture content, is that you can adjust the firmness during different stages of the process. So that's why I like using a firmer clay. Here I'm just laying out the profile of the nose. You can see an indication of the nose, a brow line, a little bit of the mount of the mouth and the chin, and then just with my thumbs pushing in to get those eye sockets. Really simple. Starting out with everything in sculpture, you want to start from as simple as you can go. So at first it was just the Loomis head, no features whatsoever, and a cylinder for the neck. Now I'm starting to look at the center line, try to add in this center line, because we'll have that with the secondary forms. And then the eye sockets also give us some more visual information, but just one step at a time. And not getting ahead of yourself is something that a lot of beginners make that mistake. So now I'm just adding mass where I think it needs it. Obviously needs a lot of mass in the back of the head. Right now the face is pretty large compared to that back of the head area. And just using my fingers to kind of press in. The nice thing about these paper, basically paper armatures, is that just like with the eye sockets, you can just kind of press in areas where there's too much mass, and it really gives way nicely so that you can make room for the eye sockets or other things that might not have been perfect right when you laid out the armature and covered it with clay. So it's really a malleable way of working, which is what I like. So kind of just moving around, checking for symmetry, looking at the side view, Now I'm trying to get the neck kind of tilted forward in the right way. Right now it looks kind of popsicle-like, so hopefully I'll fix that. Yeah, pushing it back, trying to get that angle. And I think I had this head, tilted up a little bit more than the reference. Yeah, it's kind of leaning back, tilted up. And then just taking large pieces, fairly large clumps of clay, pressing them on the surface, spreading it out. And then adding the center line, making sure it looks good from the just indication here, and then connecting them through the middle to make sure that we have a good solid center line. Somebody asked, what's the hardest part to simplify? I think around the eyes, because we always the eyes are so important and they're so complicated that we often want to get really detailed. But at the beginning of your sculptures, I really recommend just like going this simple at the very beginning, where you're just focused basically on the eye socket, on the forehead, kind of the transition from forehead to the eye socket, the transition from the cheek, but nothing with the actual details of the eye. Is for as long as you can avoid it, I recommend waiting and making sure that everything that surrounds the eye, all these forms, are accurate before you actually go in and start sculpting the details of the eye, which everybody wants to jump to. They want to sculpt like good looking eyes, but when you do jump ahead, then it just the effect is the exact opposite. The eyes look worse because they don't feel like the structure is right inside the head. And so when you're sculpting, take your time with the eye sockets and simplify them at first, just like I'm doing here. Very simple. And if I was doing a realistic sculpture, I pretty much start pretty much the exact same way as I'm starting here. Here, I know that I'm going to end with only the secondary forms in place. So at first I built the primary forms. I'm only going to end with the secondary forms, and then I'm going to clean up those forms and kind of abstract it. But if I was doing a realistic sculpture, I'd start pretty much the same way, building out this structure. Maybe not as clearly defined like plane changes as I have here, because I'm going to start building in the line work. I'm going to start thinking about that. But I would be abstracting it to the secondary forms first, checking it against the model, and making sure it looks good. And then I would just continue the process to start to add those details. But the eye sockets, they're what people struggle simplifying. And because they're so complicated, because they're so important, that's what I'd say on those. Let's see. Do you split the head into thirds? Let's see. Yeah. Just talking about proportions, splitting the head into thirds. And so like on here, it's 1/3 here, 1/3 there, and 1/3 to the forehead. Pretty soon you kind of just get used to, once you've sculpted enough heads and done enough references, you kind of get used to just placing things in the right area. But at first, definitely I'd pay more attention to those proportions and watch those videos. Make sure that you are laying in those features accurately. Here's another technique that I use. I just hold it right up to the reference. Because the reference is smaller, I'm holding that in front. If the sculpture was smaller, I'd hold the sculpture back and then hold it directly up just to check, like, okay, is the brow line right? Is the mouth in the right place? The chin and the nose. Right now, the nose is a little bit large, but I think I leave it a little bit large for a while, and then I kind of trim it down once I start getting into the details. But just checking it against your reference is really quick visual way of saying, like, is everything basically in the right spot? And so, but you could also, check it against actual diagrams, and you could measure and say, like, do these look right as far as the measurements? But I think usually eyeballing it, that's just training your eye to see when things look off. That's usually the best way to go about it. So that's what I would recommend for sure. Let's see. Let's see. So somebody's asking, hey, what type of plain head do you prefer more and why? Gudon or Asaro? Acero version, question mark. Let's see. So I like this version that I did. So it's the Keith version. I'd have to look. Maybe I could look those up. Those abstractions because I'm
I'm
not
back.
familiar right off the back of my head.
I think it's Asaro.
Asaro, okay,
Asaro
yeah.
head, yeah.
In Spanish, it would be like asaro is how you pronounce it. So sometimes if I don't know how to pronounce something for some reason, I just go to Spanish because that's the one other language that I know. And if it doesn't look like English, I just assume that it's a Spanish. So that's like if I mispronounce people's names or something, it's usually like I pronounce it how you would in Spanish. So yeah. Do you have examples of those? I don't know if I
the
know
Asaro head.
what those look like. Is that
yeah?
one?
I mean, if you want to pull it up on your
on a new.
you can just change
that
the
up. Just images. Oh yeah. I've seen that one. So that one's it's really blocky, and then one of the side. Let's see if we can pull it up. Let's see. So this is, and I can bring up stuff on other websites. Is that okay? Like ArtStation is where it is. Okay, let me. And then I just share. Oh, whoops. Let's see, share screen, Chrome window.
This might give me an opportunity to.
Yeah, it's me. I'm just kind of getting there. Do you see it now?
I do. 1 second though before I add it to screen. Let me.
Okay. So this is the. What did you say? Asaro?
Asaro is how it's.
And then the other one is Gudon. I think that one.
There you go.
Gudon.
So yeah, I don't know. Does yours look?
It's not showing.
Kind of like the Asaro.
Let's see. Is it brought up? Oh, okay. Yeah. So
yeah, it's on the screen.
I think so. Mine's a little bit different. Just the abstractions are different. More simplified for sure because it doesn't even get into the eyeball itself. And then I kind of like these flowing lines. It looks like what they tried to do was pretty much connect everything with straight lines for the most part. Well, there's some curving lines like here on the skull, like the side right here. So there's a few curvy lines that I see, but it looks like they're mostly going for straight lines. And I do that some areas, if I feel like a straight is a little bit better, like here on the nose, then I'll do a straight. But I do like these kind of curvy, flowy lines. I just feel that that's more organic. And even though I'm going more geometrical with the sculpture, I think it's kind of fun to have these curving lines with the plane changes. That's just kind of my style of abstraction. But when you're doing this assignment, I mentioned that you can do whatever, you can abstract the features in whatever way you like. You just have to have a basic understanding of, okay, here's the brow, here's, the transition from the eye socket to the cheek, here's the nose, the mound of the mouth without the details of the lips is what I recommend, and then the chin and the ears. So it's a little bit more simple. This, I would say, is getting into almost starting to play with the tertiary forms as far as getting into the details of the eye, especially on the one side. Here, you could say that that's the secondary forms on the simplified eye. But yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's nice. I like mine better, but I'm biased. So.
Okay.
Let's switch back.
Yeah, well, here in a second.
Yeah, good question. And I do like, I mean, it's a decent abstraction. That's a popular one. I've seen it a lot.
Oh, really? Have you tried to sculpt different kinds of heads, or do you just kind of stick with your method?
So this is the first time I've done a head. Well, maybe I've done a couple of head abstractions. I've done some skull abstractions, but this one's the first one where it's just like simplified features. But it's fun. I enjoy it. And so I might do a different version. I might do something similar, but more female proportion, because this one to me feels more male. The jawline's a little bit more square and comes down a little bit more. And it's just got kind of more male proportions as far as the transition of the brow and other things. And so I'd like to do one that's more like classic female face, and then simplify it maybe in a similar way, or maybe in a totally different way. We'll see. But that's something that I had a lot of fun with this one, so that's something that I'd like to do in the future.
Okay, nice. I think we were at the 15-minute mark there.
Okay, yeah. So here I'm just, things are starting to get smoothed out, and I'm starting to think about the plane changes, like where I'm going to put those transitions from the front of the cheek to the side of the cheek, from the forehead to the back. This is the tool I'm using for if I need to scrape away stuff or something. I just use this loop tool, and then I think the other tool I have is just like it's like a little kind of spatula, this loop tool, and then a butter knife is like the main tools that I use, I think, throughout this whole sculpture. So, and then I'm just focusing it. You can see that helps me just kind of clean up planes after, because when I put it on and spread it out with your finger, it comes pretty rough. You can see all that that texture just from laying in the clay. So coming up and cleaning it up a little bit with this tool just helps give me a better indication of what's going on. But I'm not to the point where I'm going to be using the tool a lot. I'm still figuring out the forms with pieces of clay mostly. So what's new? So John, can I ask you what's new with Proko? What are some cool things that you guys? I mean, there's this which is pretty cool. This fundraiser for Ukraine. So be sure to go check that out. Click the link proko.com/Ukraine to check out this fundraiser. And you said you guys put this together pretty quick. Is that right?
Yeah, our web developers kind of created a whole fundraising backend thing from scratch, and yeah, I mean, it's turned out pretty well so far. I've been pretty happy with it. And the nice thing is too that I know we've gotten some comments about fundraising for other different causes, and the nice thing about us building this out now is that we're hoping that we can open this up to more artists in the future so that they can fundraise for other causes and or their own personal projects. So we're pretty excited about it.
Feeding their families or other things like that.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's we're always trying to innovate at Proko for artists to make their jobs a little bit easier when it comes to marketing or making money, or just a platform that really works for their goals. So we're pretty excited about it. And I don't know when we would be able to roll out the feature to everyone. This is our test run essentially. But definitely in the future we'll be rolling this out, and I look forward to seeing what our community does with it.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. I was talking about that stuff like this. Like, I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter after this, so if you don't get these 3, which are on the donate page, and so they're $85. If you don't if those sell out, then I'll be doing a little Kickstarter, but it'll still be limited edition. And so I just plan to do it during that, and then it'll be over. And so if you get one, then you have it. And if not, then the design will be broken, and then there won't be any more. And so that's kind of the unique thing that I'm hoping that will interest people, is that it'll be kind of a one-of-a-kind casting piece. And so, and a really fun assignment. So even if you don't get this, you should get some clay and try sculpting a simplified head. It's just a fun thing to not have to worry about the details that we all struggle with so much. Just kind of a fun assignment. Let's say anything else that Proko's working on that you can give us a hint on, the behind the scenes.
No, I would say not that I can share yet. We are getting ready for a couple big things later this year. We've got Vision X coming up And then we've also got Lightbox. So we've got a couple of conferences that we're going to be part of, or conventions. And then, yeah, I don't want to, I can't really share too much because in the past we've overshared, and then, you know, something happens.
Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, all
it
of
takes
these things.
time, and things get delayed, and then we get like a ton of emails saying like, hey, you announced this, where is it? And, you know, we have to backtrack a little bit. So
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so, but I will say, you know, that I've been looking at, you know, all the new features that are coming out to Proko, and there is a lot of stuff that is in development. That's really exciting for, you know, the rest of 2022 and 2023. So I think artists are going to continue to see the platform evolve and get more user friendly and get a lot more features added. And you know, I think they're going to be really happy with the direction that Proko goes in.
Yeah. It's awesome. I'm excited. It's cool that there can be a company that I can work with that's in California. You know, the technology is there, and yeah. Originally, I was gonna go and film the figure sculpting course in California, like with the team and everything, and record it there. But then because of the shutdowns and everything, I had to do it here in Utah. But I think it ended up being better because I think it would have been a lot of wasted resources. Because like after going in front of the camera and taking it myself, it was like I needed a lot of retakes and stuff like that, and so I think it ended up being a better thing to do it remotely. But it is cool to be able to work with so many artists around the world, basically, with the technology we have. Very exciting.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, Andrew, I was going to ask you. So this is a male head, right? That you're sculpting right now?
Yeah. You can see the reference right there. That's kind of that
Yeah.
A+A.
So what would be some of the like key differences that you would need to make for a simplified like female head?
Yeah.
Essentially.
It depends on the person, but if you're just going for like average female head, you know, usually the jawline right here is a little bit narrower, and so and also the male jaw tends to come down a little bit more and then come out, whereas the female jaw, that angle is a little bit more obtuse, and so it's kind of a jaw that kind of flows a little bit more. Same thing with the transition from the forehead to the nose. On males, it tends to be more blocky, and so on me, you can see it kind of comes down and then dips in a little bit and then comes out. But on a lot of females, it's almost just a smooth S line transition, like from the brow to the nose. It's very smooth. And so, just kind of, if I was to do a female and abstract it, I would probably just focus on more flowing lines, less blocky abstractions, and just kind of a little bit smoother in the way I treat those abstractions. But at this stage, it almost could be either one. You just see how thin that jaw looks, especially from the front view. But then as I kind of add some mass there, I think now it looks pretty clearly masculine right now. Just you see that jaw line is pretty distinct, that brow line pretty distinct, and that corner of the eye just more blocky. So those are just some things to keep in mind. If you're trying to make something feel more feminine, you know, go for more flowing, softer forms, generally less detail, less like wrinkles and things like that. If you're going for an attractive feminine look, and usually as you add details, then it makes it look older, or it can make it look more blocky. If you add more musculature, whether it's in the face or in the body, then it tends to look more masculine. So just keep those things in mind depending on what you want, because might actually want to change it from your references, and some models that you have might have individuals are different. So there might be women with broader shoulders and narrower waists than the average, and you might want to change that depending on what you're going for. So just keeping those things in mind is what I'd do. But yeah, I think I will do a female version because that would be fun.
Well, yeah, I guess that's another question too, is with because I know you're coming out with the portrait sculpting course, and this is a simplified male head, but there is a lot of like physical variations between even just like different kinds of men too. Like my face is
Oh, yeah.
generally more rounded. Are you planning on making like different physical variations of the simplified head, like where they're shorter, more round, or is it just kind of like a standard that you start out with and then you add clay to it as you're, you know, sculpting the face?
Yeah, that's something that I might do in the future. This one,
Okay.
just because this is kind of the one that I had as a
Mm,
reference. As far as this, it looks very Western. It's kind of a Western facial features as far as the bone structure and stuff with this crochet, and so that's kind of the way the simplification did. But actually, this weekend, we're going to be doing a sculpting competition in Provo, and the model for that, it's going to be on the portrait. And the model for that is going to be, I think, Polynesian or Tongan. I know people, they don't like when you confuse those, but she's going to be from kind of an island look, and so very different bone structure and features. And so it is fun to sculpt people of different features. That's actually one of the assignments that I talk about, is try sculpting somebody whose facial features vary from your own. And so if you're you know Caucasian, then you might try sculpting somebody that has a different bone structure, somebody that's from Africa or from Asia, and just see how it's different. Asian faces are often a lot more flat; they don't have as much depth in the features, and so just looking for those things and being like, oh wow, there's a lot of difference between these groups, and then even in groups, there's differences in between individuals. And so just kind of being aware of those things, and then trying different things and seeing what you enjoy sculpting, I think is a fun thing to do, especially with a portrait. The more you do, the better.
mhm.
So the more variety you can fit in as you're working on it, you'll just get better and better.
So, yeah, so just to come back to my question a little bit, because maybe I don't understand quite well. So, with those drastic physical variations, that's something that you would add on top of the simplified form, or would you simplify those features before going into those
Yeah,
details?
you build it right into the structure of
Okay.
the sculpture. So just like I'm doing here, if I was sculpting the model, let's say for the portraits that I'm going to be doing this weekend, it would have been a lot wider, just because she's got a wider face. There would have been, the nose itself would have been wider even at this simplified stage. So I would have been thinking about, okay, what is the basic structure? What is the shape of the head from the side view and from the profile view? And I would have made sure that those look right. And then I would have, even though the simplifications are might have been pretty similar to what I was doing here, they would look very different just because I was basing it off of a different reference. And so those are things that I would be thinking about as early as you're doing the block in. Sometimes you don't know ahead of time, like if you're going to be sculpting what style of head and proportions that you're going to be sculpting. But when you're doing a block in, usually you do it pretty thin, and then once you see the model and stuff, then you can start being more specific on the exact shape of the head from the front and side views. And so it's really
Yeah.
just like the Loomis head, where you can do a
Okay.
Loomis head that's like the proportions of a child or a baby, and the proportions are different. You'd have it a different shape, but all of the line work is still there. And so that's kind of the way I look at these
Yeah.
abstractions.
Okay, that's good to know. We also have a new question, by the way. What are the construction lines you drew?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you saw some of the lines that I was drawing from the brow back here, and brow back here, and then the nose back here. And so those were just to give me an indication of where the ear was going to be. And then I also drew from the jaw upward, so the jaw line right here upward, just to give me the slant of the ear as well. And so you can also, sometimes you can check the slant of the nose or the profile line of the face to the ear, but the ear usually does slant backward. It's not vertically, it slants back. So I was just drawing some lines, just because lines are so much faster to move and change than adding pieces of clay and chopping them off and moving them. It's a lot more difficult. So yeah, just drawing in some guidelines before you commit to how far back the ear is from the front plane of the face and other things like that. It's really helpful. And so I do that a while. Same thing when I was drawing. I think I drew a line for the brow, like where the hairline would be. those lines just really help quickly give me, additional information without without it being difficult to change it if it's off.
Okay. Now, one thing I'm noticing about this sculpture is it seems like her or the guy's neck is very long. Is that so?
Yeah.
Just like to ease of use, like so you can work on it, or
Yeah. So I just built,
okay,
it was just like the armature that I built really long so that it was up from the table a little bit. But later
okay,
on in the process, I come with bits of clay and then just build it out to say, okay, here's where the bottom of the neck will be once I make a mold. And that's what I did for this. And so you can see here, the neck isn't nearly as long as it is over there. But there, it
right,
just
okay,
helped for me to have it lifted up off the table. So that's something else when you're building an armature, you can think like what makes it the easiest to work on. But it was just as simple as that. But yeah, it's definitely like those alien creatures in Star Wars where they go to that planet that are cloning
yeah,
that are doing the clones. It looks
yeah,
like one of those creatures.
yeah. That's a very good tip though, because I would not have thought to do that. I guess as a beginner, I'd be like, okay, I need to make this as accurate as possible, including the neck to start out with. But yeah, I guess that's something that you could
Yeah.
easy adjust. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easily adjustable. And right now, yeah, it really does look just like it was like had one of those neck stretching bands or whatever, where it just
Yeah.
stretched the neck out. But no, I change it by the end, and then when I take a mold, I cut off a lot of the bottom of the neck, and so those are things that you can do. It's not very difficult to do. What takes the most time is just what I'm doing right now is just kind of refining the forms,
Mhm.
deciding on the transitions, and then cleaning them up. The cleaning up is like half the entire process. Like getting
Right.
getting it to this stage was like maybe 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours, and then finishing it to where it was ready to take a mold and cast it was like 4.5. So I spent more time just finishing the surface than coming up with the design itself. So that's something else to keep in mind. If you're going to finish something with a fairly smooth surface, like just expect to spend some time just going over the same area basically over and over again until it's pretty smooth. Let me see. Yeah, so how do I know when let's see, are they still available? Are the heads still there?
I can
If they're
check
still
really quickly.
available, yeah. So if
I think
you're
they're still there.
if you're interested in getting these, they are still available. So there's 3 available. They're $85 and I'll ship it out to you, and it's a physical sculpture that you can hold, and a plaster cast, and you'll have this one. So this is 2 of them, and then the other one's at my studio. But yeah, it should be very helpful, especially for drawing. I think it's you can put different light sources, and it helps you kind of simplify those forms, do Loomis head practice and stuff like that. Those clear lines for the brow and stuff, it really helps to kind of do some of that work for you of simplifying the head.
Yeah. And honestly, too, probably I don't know if we'll sell them during this live stream, but I'm sure like as people watch the replay as well too.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Well, there's
um,
they're there.
oh,
So
I guess one thing you should probably mention too is this is obviously sped up, so maybe you can also talk about like how long usually it takes to create a simplified portrait like this.
yeah. So when I actually recommend this assignment, I recommend doing it a little bit smaller of a scale,
Mhm.
because this one took me like 7 hours, 8 hours total, and then we're speeding it up to like around 2 hours, I think, is
Yeah,
what we're going. So it's just a long process, but the smaller you go, the quicker you'll be able to build out those forms. And if you're not going to mold it and cast it, then you really could go to this stage, because all of the secondary forms are in place. That's pretty much as far as you need to go before you start worrying about the details if it was going to be a realistic sculpture that you're going for. But to finish it, I expect if it's this stage, I'd expect to spend around 10 hours on something like this. But then I work pretty fast, so it might even be more. So it took me 8 to 7 or 7 or 8 hours, but it might take you 15 or 20 if you wanted to get something similar with a similar finish if you don't have the experience. And so that's something else to keep in mind. I recommend, doing it smaller, and smaller sculptures finish faster. You can kind of play with the abstractions faster, change things quicker. It doesn't take as much time to move around clay or smooth out the surface and things like that. I also think if you're going to do this, maybe do it in a polymer clay like Sculpey, and then you can bake it in your oven at home and have a permanent version of it just to use as reference for future sculptures. And so that's something else that you can do that would be kind of cool just to have.
So Andrew, is the portrait sculpting course, is that going to cover casting as well, or is that going to be something that you do?
So there's a lesson on casting in the figure sculpting course, but it'll be pretty simple. It'll be casting something like this, like a torso that's not super complicated. It doesn't have the arms or the heads. It's not a multiple like mold. Like, I think there's a 2-part mold. So there's basically the front and the back. Whereas some molds, if you're doing a full figure, they can get really complicated, and you cut off basically the head. You do 2 or 3 or 4 parts to the head mold, and then the hands and everything. So it's going to be pretty basic for the figure sculpting course. And then I'll probably also do something pretty basic for the portrait sculpting course. I'll maybe show something similar to the process that I did for making a mold for this, but it might be maybe for the self-portrait that I did, because I didn't film the process of making a mold for this. But basically, it's just cutting the sculpture in half, doing a front part, doing a back part, and then making it so that you can kind of clamp it together. But I think I'll probably do something simple, but mold making, it could be its own course, just because there's so much to learn about it. And so maybe I will do in the future, I might do like a mini course on mold making that goes a little bit more in depth, because I'm really just like scratching the surface on mold making, and I'm using pretty cheap materials, pretty inexpensive materials. So that might be interesting for some people, because it can get pretty expensive pretty fast when you're making molds. So I'll touch on it. Probably won't go super in depth, just because it's not a course on mold making, and it could really have its own course. So hopefully in the future, maybe I'll do a little mini course that's a lot of free stuff, and then not too expensive. But yeah, mold making is frustrating. What was that? Oh, are you talking? So I think your sound's off.
Forgot I muted myself. I'm outside right now because my house is kind of small, and my son is pretty loud. He's like a year and 5 months, so he can get pretty loud, and I didn't want that background noise. But anyway, I don't think you covered this, but it'd probably be good to also kind of talk about what tools you're using for the sculpture.
So you can see I'm using that loop tool a lot. That's just there on the table, and then I have the butter knife. So here I paused just to give a turnaround, but yeah, just a normal loop tool. So it's something similar to like this, pretty similar to this for most of the scraping away and deciding exactly what the forms are going to be. I'm just kind of coming over the surface and refining and defining those forms, and then just a simple butter knife. And then I don't think I have an example of so the other tool I have is something that's kind of like this, but it's rounded at the top. It doesn't have this point. It's rounded at the top, and it's kind of got a similar feel as just the tip of your finger, which is why I like it. And so when I'm doing the simplified texture, that's the tool that I'll use to kind of go over the surface and clean up any of the marks that are left from this tool or from the knife. But those are pretty much it. And I have done sculptures similar to this with just a butter knife. So the tools are really they're really secondary to what experience you have and your expertise in just forming the clay in ways that you imagine. Yeah, you can see there, I'm just kind of taking that loop tool and then scraping it across a surface, trying to come. Usually I try to come, like if there's a form, like if I was sculpting this, I'll try to come across it with the form at first, and then I'll come against the form after to clean it up. And then I might do that a couple times. Like I might change directions a little bit and come kind of at a diagonal coming this way, and then I might come at a diagonal coming the other way, just because as you're working around the form, it really helps to come at it from different directions. If you look at the sculptures by like Michelangelo and other masters of the past, and you look at some of their unfinished sculptures, you can actually see the tooth marks of the chisels that they were using, and they would come over one side of the form, and then they would come the opposite direction and kind of get this cross hatching effect with the tool marks that they were using. And then eventually they would finish it. But it was a really good way for them to feel the form as they're moving around the form with their chisels and stuff. And so I'm just doing something similar with the sculpting tools. Here I'm just cutting off the tip of the nose.
Still, so Andrew, this might be a little silly, but have you ever just accidentally like taken your knife and like carelessly like lopped off the nose of a sculpture midway?
I haven't. It's well, okay. So the first time that we did the figure sculpting competition for Figure Sculptors United, which was in 2020, it was like a half life size sculpture, so pretty large, like 36 inches. It's like half life size, really large, in water-based clay, so it was heavy. And I was moving the sculpture, and it slipped and it fell down, and it was like halfway through the competition, and it was just like bent so fast, and so that was pretty disappointing. But the crazy thing is, when you have things like that with clay, it's actually usually pretty easy to fix. So if it was a little bit more dry and it would have like cracked and shattered, it would have been way worse. But it was still pretty moist at that point, so it basically just bent everything weird. But then I was just able to kind of bend things back, and there wasn't actually a ton of work to totally redo because the forms were still basically there. But with stone sculptures, I've had it where I've dropped a stone sculpture and then it breaks, and then I had to totally change the design. So it's with, that's why I recommend starting like traditionally. I like stone. I think stone is a nicer finish, but I started with these courses because additive clay, being able to add and then remove and then add and remove and kind of push it back and forth, is just really valuable when you're learning. Because in stone, once you take it off, you're not going to put it back. So if you make mistakes, it just keeps getting smaller and smaller.
So you don't gorilla glue stone back on the.
You can epoxy stone back together. Okay. You can do it, and I've even seen people that have broken their sculpture, or even purposely like broken a sculpture and then glued it back together and used gold leaf to like show where the cracks are and everything. Is like
that's like isn't that like a Japanese?
Oh technique? Yeah. I've seen that with them fixing like
the gold lacquer
cups and stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So I have seen that, but when mine broke, it was early enough in the process that it wasn't worth it, and I just changed the design. Because usually the epoxy, depending on the epoxy, it's pretty expensive to get an epoxy that's actually as hard as the stone itself. So pretty expensive and hard to get that. And I want my sculptures to last a long time, so I usually don't glue it back together. But yeah. So yeah, it's coming. You can see the lines are starting to become more clear, and I'm moving around the sculpture. You can see the difference between that back part of the sculpture and the parts that I've worked on more in the face. It's just starting to get closer to a cleaner finish. But it takes time, and I like to kind of jump around. So you can see I'm jumping around. I'm still deciding, like, okay, is it coming in enough at this area around the mouth, around the nose? Do the lines look good? Like what could be changed? Is the transition from the cheek down to the chin, does that look good from both sides, and do they match? Because this one's a symmetrical sculpture, so it takes a lot of time to make sure that that line work matches and things like that. But just kind of jumping around and starting to refine and define. That's what my art instructor would always talk about.
And I just want to remind everyone that we are taking questions. So if you have them, this is the time to ask them for Andrew.
Let's see. Somebody says mold making is a course I would definitely buy. I struggle with that every time. Yeah, I still make mistakes with mold making. It's tough. It's tough. And the casting process as well, to get it cast without bubbles or defects or things like that. Even these ones, I had to do some fixing up afterwards. So while it's still basically, while the plaster is still moist, you come in with a new plaster, and then you kind of fill in those bubbles and clean it up in a way so that it looks clean and everything. But it is hard to get a mold that is perfect, and rarely does a sculpture come out of the mold perfect. You usually have some cleanup work that you have to do. So plaster is nice to work with because it's pretty easy to clean up, to add a little bit if there's holes that need to be filled, or to if you need to take away from like the seam line or things like that. It's pretty easy to clean it up just with like an X-Acto knife or something like that. So plaster is good to work with as you're learning mold making. And then if I do a course on that, I'd probably like break it down into like cheap mold making, and then some more expensive types of mold making, because I like to use inexpensive materials when you're learning, especially when you're learning, because you'll have molds that do not turn out. And if you use for a mold this size to cast something that's this size, you could easily spend like $150, $200 on just the supplies to make the mold, depending on what you're doing. But yeah, easily. And then if you mess it up, it's like you just blew $200 and it's gone. And you can't, recycle the materials. And so, but yeah, and then I probably have like how to do plaster molds. So just using plaster, making a mold with plaster. And then I'd go, that's like the cheapest way you can do a mold. And then I'd maybe have one on using some air dry silicone that you can get at a hardware store. And then I'd have like the actual mold making supplies, which start to get pretty pricey. But I'd experiment with the plaster and the cheap stuff first, as you're learning, for sure, because you learn something every time you make a mold. And so that's why it's important to learn from somebody that's done it, but then also to do a few yourself, and you find like, oh, I tried to maybe cut a corner here or do something that would save me some time, but that usually ends up just ruining the mold and costing you time and materials. So that's the tricky thing with mold making.
Great.
But it's an important thing, especially if you want to, make your own casts and start selling stuff online, which is something, one way to monetize the sculptures that you do. So it is a important skill to have.
Awesome. And then someone just asked, what are your thoughts on using pre-made armatures like true form armatures? I don't know what that is.
So I don't know if I'm familiar with a specific brand, but I haven't found any armatures that are pre-made that I like more than my own armatures that I can make. And so once you know how to make your own armatures, it just makes more sense. You can build it specifically to the proportions of the person that you're sculpting. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want. You can, add hands. If it's a larger armature that's like half life size or bigger, you can add actual wire hands. And for smaller armatures, you don't usually need that. But I've just found that they're usually restricting, and I don't like that. And so when I went to college, that's what they had. They had pre-made armatures, and the system was it was basically like the model was there, and they were just like, okay, sculpt the model. And so I didn't want the courses that I built to be like that. I was like, well, I want to know how to actually build the armature. And so that's why I went over all of that stuff and proportions and things, because I felt like that was something that was lacking in my in the classes that I took. And so being able to do it yourself is worth a lot. And I think, you can get cheaper materials, there'll be cheaper armatures, and they'll be more specific to exactly what you want for each individual sculpture. So I definitely say, like, learn how to do it. If you still think like, oh, I'll just get one just to try it out, I think that's fine. But I'd say know how to build your own armatures if you're interested in sculpting, because it's a kind of a need to know skill, unless you're going to spend a lot of money on other people's armatures. So that's my advice.
Awesome. And then another question came in. Hi, when using oil-based clay, which type do you use? Soft, medium, or hard, and why?
Yeah, so this is Chavant medium NSP, but I did order, I think 1/4 of the quantity of the clay. I ordered it hard, and then I melted it down and mixed it all together. So the hard clay for Chavant is basically like wax. It's very hard. It's really hard. So that's something that's a little bit too hard for me to sculpt with, and the medium just felt a little bit soft. The thing is with it depends on your scale. So if you're working in life size sculptures, you want a nice soft clay, oil-based clay usually, because it's something that's going to take months to do. And so unless you're very particular with how you conserve the sculpture, if you're using water-based clay, you have to spray it down, you have to wrap it, you have to be very careful. You can't leave it too long without tending to it. So if it's something that's a big project and you're a professional sculptor, usually they'll use an oil-based clay, and it'll be nice and soft for those large sculptures. If you're somebody that likes to do small sculptures, like dolls or toy size, those you usually want to use a hard clay, because then as you're holding it and you're moving things around, you don't mess up the sculpture as you're just holding it. Whereas if it's a soft clay, you just mess it up with your fingers just by holding it. So here you can see I'm grabbing the sculpture basically as I'm moving things around, or as I'm doing the tool texture. And after I move my hands, there's not like a divot in the head or anything, even though I'm grabbing it pretty hard. And that's because I've mixed in a little bit of hard clay. So for me, I like medium to hard for this type of scale. But it also depends on how fast you want to work. Because if I was going to do a portrait sculpture in one day, I would want the clay soft, because I don't want to be slowed down by not being able to move the clay quickly with my hands. I just want it soft so I can do it really quick. But if you're going to take the time to really hone in the features and the details and get really specific with the texture and stuff like that, then you'll want a harder clay. So those are things to keep in mind when choosing clay. The nice thing about water-based clay is it can be as soft, it can be super soft to the point where it's just mud, but it can be very, very soft. Usually when it comes right out of the bag, you just pick up a piece of clay, you can just spread it out just so easily. And then as you let it dry over time, it can become very, very firm until it's eventually, basically like plaster hard before you bake it. So that's the nice thing about water-based clay. It is an advantage, but I just don't like the way it makes my hands feel. I don't like water-based clay that much. So it gets everything dirty, dust everywhere. So that's why I use oil-based clay mostly.
And then I guess this is a question that I have. I don't know if you've seen Scott Flanders' sculptures, but have you used
does he do the monster, like
yeah,
he do like the pumpkin things? That's him.
Yeah,
Oh wait, and he uses
like
epoxy. Okay, yeah.
Abe's epoxy sculpt. Have you ever tried using that?
I haven't. It's so
Okay.
expensive. I was like
Oh,
$40
it's an expensive.
for just like this
Oh,
little
geez.
container. And so I was like, I wanted to try it, but I was like,
Okay.
it's just so expensive. But it is nice. So the nice thing about that is you don't have to make a mold or anything. It's just ready to go once you finish the sculpture. So that's the advantage. So if it was something where I did like limited edition sculptures and then I could sell it, then maybe I could see it. But just for something to make
to practice
as a
with
material, it's just so expensive.
Okay.
But I'd be interested in trying it because I like the way he works with it. So I'd be interested in trying it just as a material. Yep, just taking pieces of clay, spreading it out, starting to work on the neck, get the thickness in there, and then I've just decided to do plane changes where the muscles are. So the back, where the trapezius is, it kind of goes down the neck, and then the front, where the sternocleidomastoid comes around and then goes into the pit of the neck. Those are where I'm putting those plane changes. In the back right now, there's kind of a concave area, just like in the reference you can see on the side. But eventually, I just decide to fill that and make it a little bit more smooth, you can see. So it's just pretty smooth as it comes down. Yeah, right there. But yeah, this represents kind of the muscle there, and then this represents the sternocleidomastoid starting at the mastoid process and then coming down around to the neck. It actually, would maybe come a little bit farther depending on where the pit of the neck is, but that's kind of where I decided to put it.
Great. Let's see. I think we have another question. Hi, what would your advice towards making armatures for sculpting creatures with extrusions, such as the xenomorph?
I'm not familiar with the xenomorph, but
It's the alien.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's from Alien. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So just basically like things like tentacles and other stuff that comes out from the sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things. Yeah, I just so I think I even have a lesson in the figure sculpting fundamentals course that goes over just adding extra pieces of wire to your armature. But that's basically what I do is I just like make sure that there's a really secure connection, and then I just bend out extra pieces of aluminum wire, and then just build a clay. And if you're going to do something like that, I'd use a firmer clay to be able to support those features if they're coming out of ways from the sculpture and they won't have a lot of support on their own. And then you kind of have to do those features once everything on the interior is finished, because then they get in the way as you're working everything. So those are some things to keep in mind. And then those types of things are difficult to make molds for. So that's something else. I think, yeah, that's one of the advantages of digital sculpting is you can do things that would be very difficult in using traditional methods with digital sculpture, and it's just you don't have to worry about gravity or anything like that. If you're gonna print it out and then cast it, you have to think about mold making principles as you're doing the design, because I've seen people that are like, oh, I'll just do this fun design 3D, and then they get it and they can't make a mold of it because it's like they don't even know where to start, basically. So that's something else to keep in mind. It depends on what you're going to be doing it, or you might use a material that's like plaster. So if you built an armature and then built out those things using aluminum wire and then chicken wire for like the main body, and then what you can do is you can use newspaper dipped in plaster or cloth dipped in plaster and then wrap it around and build it out first, and then spread plaster over it when the inside plaster is still a little bit moist, or you can spray it, and that way you can build a finished sculpture in plaster and then paint it. And so that's a fun assignment that we did in college, was build large sculptures in plaster, and it's fairly cheap. And then you have a finished sculpture that can be painted and stuff like that. So that's something you might think about if you're going to do something that's kind of complicated, and then the plaster actually helps hold it in place, as well as the cloth gives it a pretty strong structure for things that are coming away from the main body of the sculpture.
And I guess along with that question, it popped in my head. What's the weirdest thing you've ever sculpted, Andrew?
The weirdest thing.
The weirdest thing.
I don't sculpt a lot of weird things.
Is it mostly like the human figure
unless you consider the human body weird.
I mean, some people probably do.
But depends on the body, I guess.
Have you? Yeah. I guess have you abstracted the human body to the point where it's very
Yeah. I've done some
Yeah.
pretty extreme abstractions of the human body, to where it's very, but usually it's like pretty simplified. It's just taking the torso and just simplifying it until it's just like you can barely tell what the gesture is, stuff like that. And so,
Okay.
but it's not, yeah, it's not super. It's nothing that I would say is weird. I can't think of anything that I would describe as weird, but it's definitely simplified. It's definitely
Mm.
very different than this, even this style, even though it uses kind of some of this line work, but it's very different than doing traditional style of sculpting. But it's fun. I used to think that abstraction is basically what people that don't know how to sculpt or draw, it's like what they use as an excuse. They're just like, oh, I was just going for abstracted. And I think that is the case for a lot of people. They actually don't know, they actually don't have the technical skill to do it
Mhm.
realistically. And so they say, oh, well, my style is just going to be abstraction. But once you get the technical skill, abstraction can be a really powerful tool to better understand the forms. And so that's why assignments like this, I think, are really useful, because the head is so complicated that if you do not abstract it, you will be worse at sculpting it. You won't understand it. So by abstracting it into like the primary forms with the Loomis head, um, and then adding on the secondary forms in a style that's like this, and then finally moving on to the details. If you don't follow something like that process as you're working, you'll try to make it look realistic and it'll just look terrible, because it's missing structure. And so abstraction is good for learning structure and proportions, and all of those principles that are the foundation basically of the sculpture. And so you can sculpt an eye that looks perfect, but if it's like not in the right place in the skull, or if it's not, if the surrounding features aren't correct, it won't look right. There's no way you're going to make it look right. So abstraction is really useful. I appreciate the value of abstraction more now that I have more experience. But I'd say don't let it be your crutch. Don't say, like, try to learn to do things as realistic as you can, because in that challenge you'll learn a lot. And then if you go back to abstraction as your style, you'll take what you've learned from doing it more realistically, and you'll be able to apply those things to abstractions, and it'll just be better work. So I definitely like both abstract and realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so I know you said that abstraction can help with like structure and when you go to put in the details. Is there anybody's face that you've ever sculpted that you found like extraordinarily difficult,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
with simplification?
Yeah, my self-portrait that I did for the
Okay.
portrait sculpting course, like I was so frustrated with that one. Like I was just working on it and working on it, and I just felt like it did not look like me. And I even posted some images, and somebody said, "But it doesn't look like you." And it was like, and it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear critique like
Right.
that. I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? He's right. It doesn't look like me at this stage. And so I had to change up some things. I even prayed about it, because I was like, you know what? This is something that's really important. Like, please just help me know what I would need to change to to start making it look more like me. And then I just decided, and then I just had the impression, you know what? I just need to like step back away from it, and
Mhm.
then have the references and the sculpture on a screen, like a 2D screen, and then just take every angle one at a time. And
Mhm.
when I did that, I kind of removed myself from the sculpture, and I just set
Okay.
it on the stand, and I was looking at the references, and then I just had the camera that I was recording the process right next to each other, so I'm looking at it flat and flat. And then it's just kind of spot the difference between the two angles, and then I would go make a change. The lighting was also very similar, so I could see the shadows and everything. And then I would just go, like, make a little change, come back, like make a little change, then change the angle, then do the whole thing again all the way around 360. And by the time I was done, I was like, okay, this is looking better. And so by the end, you know, it's not a 3D scan, so it's not as accurate as it would be if I took a 3D scan of my head, but it's way better than it was. And it was just kind of backing away and saying like, okay, like what are different ways to look at it. Another thing that really helped was just like stepping back away and then having a mirror in front of me and just facing the sculpture towards the mirror and me looking at the mirror and then seeing how the light fell on the face of the sculpture and on my face, and then just trying to build those shadows and things in a similar way. And so being able to check yourself is helpful. It's helpful when people let you know that doesn't look like you. So, and I'd say expect that. So that was, I think, one of the most difficult sculptures. But if you're gonna do a likeness, it's difficult. Like I don't think there's anything more difficult. I'd be interested to know what Stan thinks, but I don't think there's anything more difficult in art than a realistic portrait sculpture of a specific person and making it look like that person. Like I'd be interested.
That's where Stan always recommends, and he'd probably recommend it to you too. I don't know if you've done anything like this, but it's why it's so important to take the caricature course. The caricature course, you exaggerate the features that make people, them, and by highlighting those features, then you can kind of take those features and put them back into, a more realistic style. But that's where exaggeration is so important. And I think that's where, if you are struggling to capture someone's likeness, take the figure course or take the caricature course. Because it's so important to find those features out and then exaggerate those features. Because even Stan, this was a little while back now, but the Draftsman logo with Stan and Marshall on it for the podcast cover, it's slightly exaggerated. It's not like completely exaggerated, but he used Norman Rockwell's style a little bit to draw himself and Marshall, and he wouldn't be able to do that without knowing how to caricature the features. And I have you ever like done any caricature sculptures, or that's something you still need to do? Okay.
Yeah, that's actually one of the assignments for the course. There's going to be a lesson on caricature, and I do a caricature of Stan. And so I take some of the lessons that Court Jones did, where he drew Stan, and he drew a couple thumbnails for Stan. And then he mentioned that Stan's kind of got a baby face. And so I kind of pushed that part of it. So I made like a kid version of Stan, where he's like kind of exaggerated, really long neck, kind of that beet shaped face, but it looks like a baby, basically, kind of version of Stan. And it was really fun. It was a fun sculpture, just like it was a smaller one. So maybe like half life size instead of this. It's like 3/4 life size. But really fun assignment. Yeah, really fun assignment. And so that's why I recommend that students do something similar, and maybe even a couple times, because definitely look at some of the videos that Court Jones does, because he is very good at that, really skilled at picking apart, like, well, what makes this face unique, and how can you pull that? How can you pull that to the forefront, and then kind of push the things that don't make them unique to really pull out who they are. That's a really valuable skill. And so it's a fun assignment. I'm excited for when that comes along. So
yeah, that'll be cool to see. Looks like we have some more questions, so I'll read those off. Let's see. What is the largest sculpture you have ever done?
So I did a sculpture that started, it was a stone sculpture, and it was an abstract female. Pretty simple, but the piece of stone started at 1,200 pounds. And so it was a heavy piece of stone. It was probably a little bit over 5 feet tall and then like 3 feet wide. It was kind of a long stone shape, kind of like a long egg or something like that when it started. And that was the biggest sculpture. And it was a pretty simple design, but a lot of like flowing planes and then some twisting lines, similar to this type of abstraction, but even more simplified. and that was the largest sculpture that I did, and it was in black Utah marble, and it was a really cool piece of stone because there were all of these fossils inside of it. So as I was like carving away, I would find horn coral. So it's like these horn coral, and it just has the most intricate little body like calcite deposits that are left behind from this coral. And it was just so cool sculpting that type of stone. And then when I polished it and finished it, you could still see all of these pieces of coral throughout it. And so that was a really fun, big sculpture. It was a big project. And then my instructor, he's like, "Oh, I don't think you'll be able to finish this in time for the show that was going to be that it was going to be in." And so I took that. I was like, "Okay, I'm going to finish this." and he didn't think I could finish it in 3 months, and I finished it in 2 months. And so and it was a big project. But yeah, that's the largest
Is that something? Is that something you kept, or did you sell that one?
That one's still, I still have it. It's at my uncle's house. And because it was outdoors, it's not a good environment for that type of stone, just because it kind of wears away from the rain. So now the polish that I put on it is basically worn down, and now it just kind of looks like a gray stone, almost like a granite, but not polished. So you kind of lost some of the details. So it's kind of an indoor sculpture, and for an indoor sculpture, it's really large. So it's kind of a niche thing, and kind of a high price point. So so if somebody wanted it, then I'd have to just like polish it again, and then it'd have to be an indoor sculpture. And so that's kind of the story behind that one. Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Oh, and then I guess the follow-up to that question, and what are the difficulties you encountered in scaling up?
So the process is the same. So I'd have a maquette that I'd make in this type of clay, and then I would use that as a reference to hold like directly up to the large sculpture and just check it from every angle. And I don't use like point machine or anything like that. If I was doing a very realistic sculpture, I'd probably use like a point machine that actually says, like, you have your model, and then you have the sculpture, and you have a system that you use where you know exactly where the same point is on each one. But for the abstract work, it's not as important. You just want to have basically a sense of the design. And the process is the same. It's just like polishing one area that's a square foot, is just multiplied the larger you go. It just, the time that it takes going over the same area with the sanding machines and tools that I use, it just takes a lot of time. So the bigger you go, just expect kind of it's a little bit, it like kind of doubles the time it takes, especially if it's difficult to move around. So that was something about this sculpture, is I'd have to have a pulley system above it whenever I had to move it. And so it was just a beast of a project. But those are kind of the things that you have to be thinking about. If it was like life size stone sculpture, more realistic, then it might be just working in different areas, like working down low, working up high would just it just makes your body tired, working several hours with a grinder or with chisels and stuff. So just expect to put in a lot more work the bigger you go, a lot more time, a lot more work. So but the nice thing about some of this stuff is now they have the technology where you could take a 3D scan of this and then enlarge it in foam, and then you finish it with just some clay over the top of the surface to get it finished. And that's what a lot of people do for large monument sculptures of that are bronzed. That's what the process is for that.
And then I guess along kind of those lines, have you ever like done a bunch of photos or taken a 3D scan of your work and then 3D printed it?
No, I haven't.
No? Okay.
But I've been interested. I've gone in contact with some companies that did something like that, but it wasn't at a price point that made sense. It would have been cheaper to just make a mold and cast it. So, but I'd be interested in figuring that out, especially if there was a way to bring down that price point of that. Or if there was a reason, like if somebody was like, you know what, I like this sculpture, I want it blown up to, like, let's say somebody was like, oh, I like this sculpture, I want you to do it 6 feet tall in stone, or 6 feet tall in bronze, then, you know, there would be a reason for me to go hire somebody and do that process of having it blown up in foam and then finishing it, the details by hand. But I just haven't had that that opportunity yet. But it would be something that would be cool to work with some different technologies to make the process a little bit easier.
Nice. Let's see, kind of a specific question. After using monster clay for a silicon mold, it feels like it loses elasticity after it is removed from the mold. Does that happen to you?
So this clay, I haven't experienced that with mold, so I don't know if it has something to do with the material that you're using for making the mold. This clay, what it does is just as you leave it out, it kind of the surface of it kind of hardens, and it loses some of I think they call it oxidizing, and so it loses some of the elasticity, some of the, it feels like moisture, but I think it's just the oils that kind of harden on the surface. But then usually once I if it's a sculpture that's sat out for a while, and then once I, you know, move around the clay a little bit and kind of mix that outside layer in with the inside layer, it's not too noticeable. But that is something that happens with this type of clay over the time, and I imagine that it's something similar with the monster clay, though I haven't used monster clay that much myself. But yeah, there's just, you know, this type of clay doesn't last forever, and if you put it outside, like I would do when I was working on stone sculptures, it was basically, it got to a point where it would be not usable for other things, just because it was so dusty, and then the hard outside layer, and they were just little maquettes, and so it wasn't like a lot of expensive clay. But yeah, I have experienced something similar, so that's just something to deal with.
Cool. And I don't know if you want to show the cast head behind you again, because these are rewards for.
Yeah, so this is the reward available that's going to go towards that donation that goes to Ukraine. And so this is for the fundraiser, proko.com/Ukraine. And there's 3 of these available. And then once they're gone, those are all the rewards that there's going to be for this cast. I will do something in the future, maybe to sell some additional ones, but for the donation, that's what there's going to be, is 3 of these. And let's see, the light is pretty strong. Okay, maybe that's better. And so simplified head, really fun assignment. Kind of just a different type of abstraction than some of the other ones that I've seen. Simplified forms. You don't have to worry about the details. You can get the Loomis head from different angles, take pictures of it, move things around. That's available. I think they're still available over there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Let's move on to more questions. So this question is all in caps. I'm not going to read it like it's all in caps, but
they're serious asking
this. They are very serious. When is a casting video coming out? We need your help.
Yeah. Well, there will be one for the figure sculpting course, and it'll be not this torso, it'll be the male torso. Just the process of that. So it's just a 2-part mold. It's a simple mold, so it's not as complex as you'd have to get if you're gonna do like a full figure cast. If you're interested in that, if you can't wait, you need to know about casting right now, I would check out Brick in the Yard Mold Supply. Brick in the Yard Mold Supply. I think Brick in the Yard is their YouTube channel, and they have video tutorials on mold making. That's just what they do, and they provide the supplies. But the molds that they do, if you need, you can use cheaper supplies and just use the same principles. But they go over mold making. They have videos using their product and showing you exactly how they make a mold of different types of sculptures, whether it's, and they also do things like body casts and other things like that. So if you want to know right now, that's probably where I'm going to gather a lot of my information. If I do a course, like a mini course on mold making, they're a great resource. Also, the artist Eric Arneson, his YouTube channel, he's another figurative sculptor, and he has some great videos on mold making as well. And he does, some large scale molds and some complex molds. And I think he has some stuff free on YouTube, and then his Patreon goes into more detail. And so if you're interested, those are some resources that I might look into. Free resources, both of them have free resources on YouTube that you can just go and watch. And that's probably where I'll get a lot of my information if I build one specifically for Proko.
Nice. Let's see. So I think you already answered this, but maybe there's a different answer when it comes to, different parts of the body that you sculpt anatomically correct. But what do you find to be the most difficult body part to get right?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
the
still the
eyes.
head? Okay, the eyes.
It's the eyes. Yeah, the eyes, the head. The hands are also pretty hard, pretty difficult. There's a lot of angles and things, especially, a complex hand pose. But the eyes are so central to facial recognition and to just recognizing a person. And if anything is off on the eyes, the sculpture doesn't work. Like the figure sculpture doesn't work. So it's like that's where our eyes go first when we're looking at a sculpture, when we're looking at an image, when we're looking at a painting. If it's a figure, then our eyes are going to be drawn to the eyes. Even babies, right? They have a sense to look in people's eyes as soon as they're born, and so there is something essentially human about our desire to look into people's eyes, to see what they're thinking, the whites of their eyes, where they're putting their attention. That's something that is very human to us, and so we're very good at it. We're very good at facial recognition, and just the tiny differences in the shapes around the eyes, the shapes that shadows make, the shapes of the forms themselves. Anything that's off even a little bit is going to be glaring when you're working in art. And so that's just something that you have to say, okay, like this is the most difficult thing. So I recommend, with the eyes, do exercises of the eyes, study boards of the eyes often if you want to get good at it, because that is the a big challenge. And then other features, the ears, the nose, the mouth, those can be difficult too, but the eyes are really what will make or break the head in general. Like if somebody knows how to sculpt eyes, they put in the work to know how to sculpt pretty much anything on the face. But no matter how good everything else is on the face, if the eyes aren't good, people are going to look at it like it'll look weird, and so they'll be able to tell it's like an amateur sculpture.
Yeah, it's so crazy that such a small body part uh, is so important to get right. Because I know, just like in movies with the CGI, there's that like uncanny valley now that they're trying to do their best to get rid of.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
know
yeah,
with like Unreal Engine 5, right? And the MetaHuman project or whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's called, how they're trying to like bridge that gap, and I feel like it's almost there.
Yeah, yeah, but it's just
Um,
off enough to where to where it's like
yeah.
you can just tell a little bit.
Well,
But
did
yeah.
you see, what was it? Blade Runner, the sequel Blade Runner movie that came out? I
No, I
still
didn't see
haven't,
that.
but I saw there was a scene with the woman, the android woman, that I saw like a breakdown of, and apparently they spent something crazy like a year trying to get it right for just like, I think it was like a minute scene. It wasn't even a very long scene, but just trying to get every single micro detail in the movie correct, and it paid off. It looks incredible, but uh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
Well, with
crazy,
the
the eyes.
Pioneer, yeah, the Pioneer
Yeah.
stuff, it's a new technology and it's going to be rough at first. But yeah, I remember seeing something. like what is it, the Scorpion King movie or whatever, where there's that
Oh, the Scorpion King movie was
the rock like turns around and it's like totally like just terrible CGI. And so, but I saw a YouTube video of some people that went and then they redid it using just AI and face replacement or whatever AI.
Was that
it
Corridor?
was way better. What was that?
Was that Corridor? The
I don't
forget the
I don't
YouTube
remember
channel.
what the channel was called. I don't remember, but they did a good job, and they just did the face replacement like you can do on your phone now, and they just kind of use that as a cheat sheet. I don't know exactly all the details of what they did, but it was way better than the CGI of that probably cost in the millions of dollars, and they just did it over like a weekend or something. And so
Yeah.
it is pretty cool. I was also looking at the app or the technology, what do you call it? I'm blanking here, but the program that I use to edit features, which is just DaVinci Resolve for movie editing. And I was looking at the story behind that, and originally it was just for color grading, and it was a software that you had to pay a license fee to use it of $800,000. So basically almost $1 million for your studio to be able to use this technology. And now you can get it for free, and it's a better version than what they were using back then because it has so many more things that they didn't have back then. And you can get it for free. And then if you get the paid version, which has some additional benefits, which I got, it's just like $300, and then it's lifetime. And so I was just like, man, it is so incredible that over the space of 15 years, it can go from something that people are willing to pay, because people were buying this, they're willing to pay almost $1 million for. And now I can get this basically for free and run it on a laptop that cost me, $1,000. And so it's just insane. Like, we have so much technology. We can do so much with the technology that we have, that it's just crazy. It's like what people don't understand. And I think we should all be a lot more grateful for is people in the past have put so much work into all of the stuff that we have, like like cars, technology, computers, phones, the internet, like everything that we have. There are people that worked hundreds of millions of hours to build these huge systems that we can just use now, that are basically free for most people. And so it's just, we have to take a minute to be grateful for the time that we live in, because it is really incredible.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Oh, comment. The lighting on this sculpture is fantastic. Shows so much of the planes and angles. I love it. So
yeah, lighting can make or break a sculpture for sure. So when you're photographing your sculptures, take some time to figure out the lighting. It doesn't have to be, I think for this, I was using soft boxes, but even if you just have, a desk light or something that you can move around, you can find the best angles and take photos from really good angles. For this, I just tried to light the scene pretty well so that no matter which way the sculpture is turned, it still looks pretty decent. And having that main light and then just that backlit a little bit does help me to see the forms as I'm working, and then they show up pretty good. So take some time. If you're a sculptor, take some time to figure out lighting, because that will be a big benefit.
That would probably be a good free video to put out, because I imagine the lighting for taking pictures of like drawings and paintings is drastically different than lighting that you would use for 3D forms, like a sculpture.
Yeah. For an image, you basically want just like all the light on, or for a painting or something, you just want all the light, like really soft, all the light from every direction. But with sculpting, you definitely have to be, depending on the sculpture, like how you want it to look, you have to be a little bit more careful on your lighting setup. So that, maybe that is something that I could look into doing a free video on the Proko 3D YouTube channel. But yeah, lighting makes a good difference. But this one's just, it's pretty simple. Just one main light and then a backlight in the back. Pretty straightforward. But and then here, So
Oh, yeah.
I did put a white, I think it was an envelope or something, down, so you can see a little bit of the bounce light on the chin, just because I felt like it was getting too dark. So that's something
Okay.
that I don't know if you can see in some parts of the video. When the table's turning, there's like a little white thing, but that was just to help myself see what I'm working on down here. You can see, I've also, taken care of that neck. So now the neck is built out to where I wanted the end of the bottom of the neck to be.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, I would not have thought that that was an envelope that you're using. That's a clever hack.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was just what I had in my room when I was doing it. And this is when I was still sculpting in basically my our bedroom in our tiny apartment. And so now I got a studio space. So I've moved up in the
Oh,
world.
nice.
I have a little studio space that I'm renting out that has, everything set up. But here I just have some sheets that I bought from Walmart, some black sheets that and then I got hangers that I got from the dollar store and put it all around the room. And then some sound pads that I also that I just cut up foam and then put it in pillowcases that I got from the dollar store and just like put those up on the wall. And so it was just kind of a very bare bones setup, but you could see that it doesn't look bad at all. And I like the black. So we were
Mhm.
considering doing a white background, but I think black for sculpture is a nice background to work on. So
Yeah, I think you can focus on the sculpture better when it's completely black.
mhm.
I like that. Oh, we have another quick question. What do you usually use to heat up the clay?
So right now in my studio, I just have a big bucket that I put the clay in, and then I'll just kind of tip the bucket over so it's open. And then I have a little space heater that just has a
Mhm.
fan, and I'll just plug that in so that it's blowing warm air in there. And that's usually enough to warm it up. Um, I've also seen people that'll put it in a crock pot, like on a very low temperature. But I find that melts the clay even when it's on a low temperature, and I don't like it melted. I just like it warm for that beginning stage. Also, you can what I've done in the past is just take a blow dryer and then set it up on something so that it's just facing towards a box or a pot or something, just that kind of keeps the heat in, and then just let that blow dryer run for a while just to keep it a little bit warm. I've also had times where I've just put it in the oven as low as it'll go, like 150 degrees is pretty ideal. If you can get 150 degrees and let in there for like half an hour, and then it's really nice and soft. So those are the ways that I go about warming up the clay.
Cool. Is there anything that you want to comment on with where you are in the sculpture right now?
Um, let's see. Well, it's just so this is kind of the boring part. All of the forms are basically in place. It's like everything is like all the line work is basically decided. The symmetry
Mhm.
is pretty much there. It might be a little bit off, and so I'm just going around and trying to fix those things, um, and just working on the surface texture, cleaning that up. Jump as I'm getting closer to finishing, I'll be jumping around more, and just kind of moving around as I'm seeing like what still is lacking. Here, I'm just trying to redefine the line at the bottom of the neck because I felt like if I cast it and it didn't have enough neck on the front, that it would be leaning too far back or too far forward, something like that. And so I just wanted to redefine that. So just little things like that. If you're going to mold, then you want to be thinking about those things, where you want the mold to take place and stuff like that. That's why I'm redoing this neck. But it's really just a slowly working out that texture, going over one area several times, doing the texture again and again, and then coming back and cleaning up, jumping around. So that's just basically what I'm doing. Here you can see I'm just, taking these pieces of clay, warming it up just in my hand, and then pressing it onto the surface. And
Oh,
usually when
nice.
I'm working, I'll have a little bit of clay in my hand, so that just keeps it a little bit warmer. And so it's not super warm, but if I'm working, especially the earlier stage, you can see I'll just keep some of the clay in my hand. That just keeps it warm enough to where it's not super hard if I need some more clay. Usually at this later stage, you don't need to be adding as much clay. I can just take little pieces of clay with the tool, just like I'm doing right here. Take a little piece of clay and then press it onto the surface and spread it out. And that, the clay doesn't have to be super soft for that, but especially on the earlier stages, you want it nice and soft.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a far out question. I don't know. I'm constantly on like the Proko TV Twitter, and I came across I've been like following more sculptors and digital artists on there, and there was someone that came out with like digital gloves
Oh, really?
for like VR sculpting.
Oh, that's
And
clever.
I was like, oh man, I wonder. Yeah, because I mean, for digital artists, you still have the same kind of interface. You're still holding something and then, drawing on a surface. Whereas I know for digital sculptors, you don't really have that. It's,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
either
it's
go from your hands to like
yeah,
using a
it's
mouse
basically
and
just a sketch pad. Yeah, just the same,
yeah.
drawing to sculpt. Yeah. Yeah, but
And even
that's a
with like,
cool idea.
yeah, well, even with the VR, like the Oculus stuff, you're still holding like two controllers. But I feel like if you can use your hands, uh, that'd be a nice interface to work with. Although I don't know how that would work with being able to feel the sculpture, because I know that's
Yeah,
crucial.
yeah. I wonder what you could do there. But I'm thinking, well, I think where, virtual reality is going to be moved to next is like those types of things, like bodysuits,
Mhm.
and then they have, electrodes that'll pull the fabric in different areas, so you can actually start to feel stuff, so it'll just kind of press against your fingers and stuff. I imagine that the technology is not there for that yet, but I imagine that that'll be something that eventually for video games and stuff, you'll actually be able to like feel like little bullet prick
Yeah.
or something as you're getting shot or things like that. I think that's probably going to happen in the multiverse or whatever, but I might just be stuck out here in reality. Well, I don't know. Working in traditional clay. We'll see.
Yeah. I just was wondering, like, for those like giant sculptures that you said that would be very hard to sell, to a specific client if you could do a digital sculpture, and that would probably be easier to sell, I would think. Not
Yeah, yeah.
necessarily like an NFT, but like I could see
Oh, yeah, yeah.
doing
NFTs.
sculpture work for different uh clients or something in digital
Yeah, yeah.
space.
I
But
don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, but I feel like I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. But
there is something
when
about
I'm looking at
physical
these,
work as well. I'm not
yeah, yeah.
discounting that whatsoever.
Yeah, when I look at these
Yeah.
digital products, I feel like the environment is kind of like what the environment was like in the 90s with websites, where they would say,
Mm,
"Oh, I have a website for my business," and these websites would go for crazy prices, and it was the .com boom is what they, and then
yeah.
the .com boom and crash, and I feel like it might be something similar. I might be wrong, but
Mhm.
that's kind of the frenzy feel. Like I feel like everybody's um like, oh, you need to purchase digital property, like in this
Right.
and I'm just like, man, I don't know. Seems like actual property seems like spending a couple million on actual land or property might be a better investment. But I don't, well, these people have a lot of money, so they must know something.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's
I
kind
mean,
of
to me, it's not just about the money, but like it's, I guess, at the end of the day, it's how are people going to enjoy the art in the future, I guess, is probably the bigger question, right? Because those would be the clients that you would sell to. So it is interesting to think about, like, are people going to prefer digital in the future over, physical goods? Because I know with movies, it used to, be that you hold on to like a film reel or, VHS tapes, and now people prefer to stream.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and
That's true. But the end product is basically the same. But I feel like
yeah,
there's something about holding something physical, especially like stone sculptures. That's why I really enjoy stone for the sculptures that I place at a higher price point. I just feel like stone has a weight to it, and it's got a history to it. It was made, in the earth millions of years ago. There was a process to it, and it's just a
right.
beautiful material. And so there's something about that. I don't see these new things replacing kind of that value of traditional materials. But I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
Well,
But
I know I already asked you what's like the craziest thing you've ever sculpted, but what's like the craziest material that you've ever used to sculpt something with? Like, have you used butter or
um,
ice, or like, because you can sculpt a lot from different materials.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm just
for
kind of
sure.
wondering, like, what's the weirdest sculpture material
A
you've
fun
used?
assignment. This is something we did in college,
Mm,
and it's a fun thing. Is we would sculpt in styrofoam, and so we sculpted in
okay.
styrofoam. You would basically chisel away, use files and everything to get the styrofoam pretty close to what you wanted, and then you'd bury the styrofoam in dirt and you'd pack it down, and then you'd pour aluminum, like hot molten aluminum, into the sculpture, and it would melt out the styrofoam and fill with aluminum, and then you'd have a solid aluminum cast of the sculpture.
Oh,
And so
nice.
that was a cool material and a cool process that was pretty fun, and something that I'd like to do again, with different materials. But that was fun. I'm trying to think of any other like weird materials, but that's not something that I would have thought that you would like sculpt styrofoam and then end up with an aluminum cast. But it
Yeah.
works. It was fun.
I I haven't seen a process of that, of like casting an aluminum. I have seen people like pour molten aluminum into like an anthill, and then
Yep.
like they pull it
Yeah.
out and it's all the tunnels and stuff, which is
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
crazy.
So
But
yeah, similar. But
yeah,
instead, negative space is just made up by the sculpture that you did. So it's kind of nice
right.
because you don't have to take a mold or anything. You just bury it in this casting sand, I think is what they call it, and it's a pretty fine powder. And then you make it a little bit moist, so it's not
Okay.
wet, but you add like maybe a cup of water to like a big, you know, 50 pounds or 100 pounds of this dirt, and so it's just a little bit moist so that it kind of, if you squeeze it, it kind of clumps together, and
Hmm.
and that water just helps it kind of solidify, and then you pack it really well over the styrofoam, and it catches the details really nicely. And so it was a fun process.
Oh, that's
That's
cool.
something I'd like to do again. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, well, how hard is it to pull up the aluminum? Because aluminum is
Oh,
pretty soft, right?
yeah.
So
But you build like a, what do you call it, a chute or something, so that you can just grab it. It's not hard.
okay,
Yeah, you just pull it up, and then it's just like it was buried in sand. It's not a
okay.
difficult thing. But yeah, a super fun process. So here I'm getting close to finishing. You can see how much more smooth the surface is starting to look. I'm still going to change the transition here from the chin, from the mound of the mouth to the chin. You'll see in a little bit that I'll smooth that out, so I don't go with a sharp plane change. I make it a little bit smoother for the finished. And I just like that better. But when you're sculpting this, when you're doing these types of abstractions, you do have the option of, choosing what features you emphasize, what you ignore, just like the acero head that we looked
The
at.
sorrow, yeah.
Asaro, yeah, Asaro. He chose a lot more, so he had like the separation between the lips and other things. This one I'm going much more simple. So it's just kind of, you get to decide with this abstraction. That's kind of a fun thing about it, is you decide what you want to emphasize and what you want to de-emphasize in the whole process.
Cool. Oh, it looks like we have another question. Do you cast your sculpting hollow or full?
This one is full, so it's a solid plaster cast, and that's what I do for most things. If it's resin or plaster, so far I've done it just a solid cast. So like this is just a solid cast. It's not hollow. So that's what I've done for most things. If I was going to do something that was large scale, that's when I would probably look at doing it hollow, and maybe even using like fiberglass with resin or other things to give some strength to it. Eric Arneson, if you do check out his page where he goes over some mold making, he does do that for some of his sculptures. So he uses a fiberglass material, and then I forget what he bonds it with, but it's like a type of plaster, I think, but it's a little bit, but it has like a resin mixed in. I wasn't able to find the specific thing that he used, but he does that, and then he does them hollow and then puts them together, and then attaches it together, the sculpture in parts, and then puts it all together for things that are like life size and larger. And it's hollow, but it's still pretty secure and firm. And then he finishes up the texture and everything, and it looks really nice. So that's something that I might look into it if I start doing things that are larger scale. I definitely look into that process for sure. So here you can see I'm smoothing out that. I decided I wanted a little bit smoother of a transition. I just felt like it was just not, I mean, it's a smooth transition, and then I wanted the mouth smooth, so I felt like it looked better smooth. But I'd be interested in what people think, if it looks better smooth or a sharp transition. I don't know. What do you think? What looks better?
I mean, I like it. I probably like more of a sharp transition.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I
So
almost
the
went with
forms are
that.
super defined, but I don't think I think both are good though.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
of course, I'm not the expert, so
yeah. No,
Stan
well,
has showed me like stuff that he's done, and I'm like, oh, this is great, and he's like, no, it's absolute garbage. I'm like, okay, well, looks good to me.
Yeah, well, I think you don't need to be an expert to know what you like, what your preference is.
Yeah.
That's one thing with like modern art and stuff. The people selling the art, they make it sound so complicated. Like it's like, oh well, you can't know whether something's a good work of art or not just by looking at it. And I kind of feel like, well, you kind of can. you could at least see if they knew what they were doing when they were sculpting it. And so maybe there's some interesting story or something that adds value. But I think a lot of the time they're just like, oh, I know it looks terrible, but ignore all that because it's actually worth a lot of money. And I'm just like, I don't buy those arguments too much.
Let's see. Oh, there you go.
So I think it's almost at the end. I think that's pretty close to the finished. Is it?
I think so.
Or how much longer does it say? Can you see how much longer it is on the?
I think it's got like a couple more minutes, but I don't know. When you were filming the demo, did you just leave the camera on the sculpture for a few minutes, or?
Well, I sent all the raw footage, so I don't know what they included and what they didn't.
Okay.
But there should be hopefully at least a turnaround once it finishes, so there might be a little bit more. But yeah, it's just little by little. This part of getting it from that roughed out stage to this smooth stage, again, that was like 4.5 hours. So just moving kind of at this pace for a while. So I like to have, things that I'm listening to, podcasts,
right?
Stuff like that, audiobooks or things like that, because
yeah, I was going to ask you, like, when it comes to like this at the end here where you're just getting tiny little details that you want to refine. Do you get to a point where you've been looking at it so long that you need to take a break for 30 minutes or an hour, and then
Oh
come
yeah,
back to
yeah.
it?
I think I sculpted this over a couple days. So it wasn't
Okay.
like one day. It wasn't like 1 8-hour day. So I stepped back
Okay.
away from it. I like I'll go do other things. So I usually have like 3 or 4 sculptures that I'm working on at once so that I
Mhm.
can kind of take a break from one and go to another. I find that to be really useful, just stepping away, getting a fresh look at it. And then when you come back, like there's going to be things that stick out to you, and if you don't address them or if you don't write them down or make a mental note of them, you'll forget, and you'll kind of get that tunnel vision that you get after hours of working. So when your eyes are fresh, and you can look at the sculpture fresh, you might make notes. Like for example, the nose was a little bit large, and then I've trimmed it down. I think I trimmed it down from at the beginning when it was too large. And so just things like that, where it's just little adjustments. When your eyes are fresh, you're going to see those things a lot better than after you've been working at it for an hour or a couple hours. So yeah, step away often, step back away from the sculpture as much as you can. Those things will really help.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, this the little écorché that I got in the sculpture,
Mhm.
I think I got that just on eBay, and it was just like it was like $20. I thought it was a really good deal.
Oh, nice. I'm assuming the thumbs up is
Yeah, thumbs up is
y-
that's it. So there we
you're
go.
good to
Another
go.
good job. So that's me giving myself a thumbs up for a good job. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
fun sculpture, fun project, and hopefully you guys had fun watching, and yeah, go
yeah.
support the
Yeah, you want to show the cast one more time?
yeah. So this is the cast that you can get right now. There's 3 of them available, and once they're gone, they're gone. And so you can get those one of 3 that'll be available for this fundraiser. And so it really should help out for the humanitarian effort in Ukraine. I think that's a great creative thing that Stan has done to do that. I'm glad to be a part of it. And so
Yeah.
yeah, be sure to check that out.
And also, you've got your portrait sculpting course still on pre-sale as well. Just throw
Portrait
that out there
sculpture
very
course on
quick.
pre-sale that ends June 1st, and that's when the lessons are going to start coming out every other week. So be sure, if you're interested in that, now's the best time to get it. It'll be a little bit more expensive once it comes out, and so it should be a great course if you're interested in portraiture. It will go in depth. It'll go over anatomy, simplification, the bones, the muscles. We'll do caricature. We'll do like a bunch of other stuff, a self-portrait, 10 steps to a successful portrait sculpture, and a bunch of more things. And so I've tried to make it better than the figure sculpting course. So if you enjoyed that, it should be well worth it for you.
Awesome. And then yeah, we're gonna continue streaming all day on the other channel. So if you guys are interested in catching Stan and the other artists continuing their paintings from yesterday, you can check that out. Or yeah, please check out proko.com/Ukraine and get Andrew's casts and other
Yep.
rewards. So
Yep.
thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
See you around. Thank you.